Denver Broncos wide receiver Pat Bryant is rising up the depth chart, and the snaps prove that. We'll break it all down here on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, Broncos Country. Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast network in the country, and that's all because of you everydayers out there. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. I'm Cody Roark, credentialed Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. We got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show. We'll talk about Pat Bryant, where the snap counts are seeming to indicate that he has become the wide receiver 2 right behind Courtland Sutton, and there's been an increase in production. But what does it mean for the Broncos offense going forward? We'll go through that. Plus, Sean Payton acknowledged that they have to find a way to get Marvin Mims more touches. How can they do that? We'll go through that. Plus, the Philadelphia Eagles let Broncos Country down, and the Chargers are still very much alive in the race for the AFC West, but it could be decided in the next 2 weeks. You're going to get all that here on today's episode of the show, brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Sayre, Pat Bryant, we've talked about him quite a bit here on the show, and it's crazy to go back to the evolution after he was drafted. There were a lot of narratives that a lot of people had placed on him in terms of 40-yard dash speed, and I think as the season's gone about, we even talked about after he was drafted, that stuff really doesn't matter, but I think people are now seeing that stuff really doesn't matter. Pat Bryant has now seemingly, over the last 3 weeks, shout out to our friend Luca Evans for pointing this out, he has seemingly taken over an increased snap count over some other wide receivers that have been heavily in the rotation.
Yeah, he's playing a ton of snaps. We talked about that on last week's episode when we did talk about Pat Bryant, like you mentioned. We've been talking about him quite a bit over the last handful of weeks, and that is because we're seeing the uptick in snaps. We're seeing the uptick in targets. In specific, against the Raiders, he played 35 offensive snaps. He played 49 snaps against Washington the week before that, 35 the week before that. So you're starting to see a trend where early in the season, he was lucky to play in the teens. Now we're seeing, it's a minimum of about 30 snaps for Pat Bryant, and a minimum, it seems also, Cody, of 4 targets. That was one of the talking points last week, was the fact that over the last, I think it was 5 or 6 games, he had 4 targets in 5 of the last 6 games. That increased once again against the Raiders, 4 more targets against the Raiders. So we're seeing the snap count go up. We're seeing the workload increase. We're seeing the trust factor, I think, increase. And you and I both brought this up. It feels like the Broncos coaching staff trusts Bryant, and that trust between he and Bo Nix is also growing and evolving week after week.
Yeah, and Bo last week before the Raiders game had talked about Pat. The thing that he loves about him is just this guy has a great catch radius. He catches everything. Not only is he a willing blocker, but he's just a high effort guy. And like I said a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Pat once again, I was saying, hey, like he is playing that Jerry Jeudy role. Like he is Jerry Jeudy. I saw somebody put a tweet out there. I don't know who it was. Somebody said he is Jerry Jeudy with hands, which I'm like, okay, that's funny. I absolutely love getting to know Pat Bryant a little bit more throughout the course of this season. He great personality inside the locker room, just very humble, very funny, hardworking. And you see it on the field, Sayre. There's no, he doesn't buy into his own hype. He just goes out there and he works. And now you've seen that trust factor obviously increase, which I find this to be interesting because Luca Evans, our good friend over there, Denver Post. I love Luca, or as Sean Payton calls him, Evan. Luca pointed out over the week that, hey, over the last 3 games, here are Pat Bryant's snaps. Compared to Troy Franklin's snaps, Sayre, have seemingly dissipated at this point in comparison to a guy like Pat Bryant who has risen. Now, I wanted to ask your thoughts on this. Going back and watching the tape, how Denver played the Raiders and the personnel that they used in that game, I thought to myself, okay, this seems more matchup contingent. But with this trend now happening 3 weeks in a row, for Pat getting more snaps, more targets, and production, does this mean that maybe he's rising up over Troy Franklin, in your opinion, a little bit?
I do think so. I really do, because what we're seeing from Troy Franklin, and the Raiders game is a perfect example, is just missed opportunities far too consistently, which I think that there's a point at which, like the Kansas City game, right? Remember in the first half of the Kansas City game, everybody's getting on Troy Franklin's back about missed opportunities, drop passes, that this, that, and the other that seems to be a common thread with him. And then in the second half, he made some big plays, including the big play to set up the game-winning field goal, right? So it's like all is forgiven because all is well that ends well. But when it comes to Troy Franklin, these inconsistencies with dropped passes, missed opportunities, it's gotten to the point to where I don't think the Broncos can really rely on him in that way. And you want to be able to, right? You want to give him those opportunities because you believe in the talent. But man, the drop against the Raiders and the bobbled pass that resulted in a fourth down not being converted, right? I mean, these are frustrations that they've gone back to last year. And so I think you give guys opportunities when you believe in their talent and you give them chances. But at the same time, I think you have to pull in the reins a little bit. You have to say, hey, that leash isn't just going to be as long as you want it to go, right? There is a limit to what we're going to allow you to struggle with. And I think that's the point the Broncos have reached, where Pat Bryant, 100% of his targets, he caught them against the Raiders. So I know that every opportunity is different, and I realize that it's not all, it's sometimes can be apples to oranges, but it does feel like Pat. And honestly, Cody, do we want to see Marvin, which we're going to talk about today, get some of those opportunities that Troy was getting as well? It just feels like the Broncos, they need that top tier playmaker, and they're still searching.
And I did love the ball distribution from the Broncos offense and Bo Nix, completing passes to 11 different receivers on Sunday against the Raiders. But to your point, let's look at the numbers here over the course of the last 3 weeks for Pat Bryant and also for Troy Franklin in terms of targets and catches. We talked about the catches overall. Bryant, 12 catches over the last 3 games, 156 yards, including probably his best performance so far of his rookie career against the Kansas City Chiefs, right at 80 yards in that game. Troy Franklin has 9 catches for 116 yards over the course of the last 3 games. To me, I think it's more along the lines now of what you mentioned there earlier. Like, I don't think the Broncos have lost trust in Troy Franklin. I just think that Pat Bryant at this point has earned a little bit more trust based on his consistency factor, because I would say with Pat, you might make the argument he's been the most consistent wide receiver on this team so far this season. And that's not a bad thing. Look, Cortland, you're always going to get something from Cortland. I loved what we got this past week. But Pat, I think, has really kind of made a case as of late. Hey, I'm reliable. You can go to me. And once again, I want to go back to one of the toughest games that Denver played this year on the road at the Houston Texans. Sayre was late in the fourth quarter. What happened? It was 3rd and 11. Who came up big on 3rd and 11 for Bo Nix? It was Pat Bryant in traffic against that Texas defense that absolutely made Mahomes look silly on Sunday Night Football. So I do think that this is maybe a little bit of a changing of the guard in a sense. I don't think this means that the Broncos are, done with Troy Franklin, or they're looking to move off, or, not go to him as much. But I think in terms of roles and establishing those, I think the pecking order now clearly is Courtland Sutton, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, and then obviously, the other guys that we're going to talk about maybe being sprinkled in here or there. But yeah, no, I'm a big Pat Bryant fan, and I think Broncos Country certainly on board with what they've been able to get from him as well. The question is like, do you feel like we've seen at this point, like, where else can Pat evolve in his game, in your opinion?
I think that when we look at what he does really well, Cody, I love the after the catch abilities. That was something that we saw at Illinois, and what really won them a couple of games last year. I think that's easy to forget too, is that was a big reason that he was drawn to so many NFL teams, is because I think he had 2 or 3 game-winning catch and runs, for Illinois last season. So he showed that clutch factor. I feel like after the catch is where we really need to see Pat Bryant continue to get work, right? We've seen the slant routes where he gets those opportunities. I think that's been huge for him. And I just want to continue to see him build on that. I want to continue to see him. We saw the play on, I don't know if it was necessarily quite scramble drill, Cody, but Bo Nix avoided pressure in the pocket, got the ball out to Bryant, and he kind of made a move in the open field, right? And I think that if he could go back, if he had eyes in the back of his head, he would have kept going the one direction because the DB was like crashing down towards the middle of the field. And I think Pat would have had an outside lane there. So there's just so much more untapped potential. I think when you just get this guy the ball, he can make plays in space. He can make plays after the catch. And I think he's really just untapped in that regard at this point.
Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your thoughts here on Pat Bryant. Would you like to see him have a more increased role going forward? Let us know here on today's episode of the show. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Marvin Mims and why Sean Payton believes that his role needs to increase here for the offense going forward. You'll get that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays, they move fast. One big play, suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting, right? You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, right? A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. So if you want to check out the live spreads and the money lines, you can do that. The Broncos, they've actually dropped from being 1.5-point underdogs at home to the Packers to now 2.5-point underdogs at home to the Packers. You can check that stuff out. You can check out player props as your favorite players heat up. Maybe another big game for RJ Harvey this week. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Marvin Mims has needed an increase in touches inside the Broncos offense. We've been pounding the table for that all season long, and it may be coming soon. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Before we get into the Marvin Mims conversation, Broncos Country, I got to tell you about the Everydayer All Access Club here. You make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, but if you're a true diehard Broncos fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you because you'll get one-on-one text access with myself, with Sayre. You'll get all access episodes that only go to all access subscribers. It's different content than what you get here daily on Locked On Broncos. This podcast still stays free, but you get exclusive content that nobody else gets elsewhere. You get film breakdowns, all 22 film reviews, and you get a daily exclusive newsletter and a 15% discount to the Locked On merchandise store. So head to lockedonbroncos.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access today. You can find the link in our show notes below. Sayre, Marvin Mims, he has been such a breath of fresh air since coming to the Denver Broncos. We've seen him certainly in back-to-back seasons in his first 2 years become an all-pro returner. He's been selected to the Pro Bowl. I know there's different criteria for Pro Bowl voting, but if it were the old rules about how the Pro Bowl was honored, Marvin would certainly still be there regardless of fan voting. But we have begged and we have pleaded with Sean Payton. Can we find a way to get this guy more touches on the offensive side of the ball? Because he has a skill set that is dangerous, that makes him qualified, that makes him scary to certain defenses. I was going to go with the Liam Neeson Taken reference there, but I kind of butchered it there. But you get what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I think that, look, with Marvin, it feels like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? Because I think we've had this discussion every year that he's been in the league. And it's kind of wild because early in his rookie season, I mean, the first 2 games, it looked like, okay, the vision for Marvin Mims is extremely clear, right? He is a vertical threat for the offense. He is a dynamic threat on special teams. That's what he's going to be, and his game is just going to continue to evolve. As you and I know, Cody, progression in the NFL is rarely, if ever, linear. It is a very rocky path to ascending as a player in the NFL, but for this to be the conversation 3 years in a row, there's a lot of infighting amongst Broncos country. I posted something on my Twitter page. I know you responded to that post, and a lot of other fans responded, and people are saying, like, Marvin doesn't run good routes. Marvin doesn't get separation. Marvin doesn't do this. Marvin doesn't do that. I don't know if that's the case. I can't believe that to be the case. I know that there's been time. It's not, right? I know there's been times this season where we watch the all 22 and we say, hey, Marvin didn't clear this route enough, right? He didn't get depth enough, or he didn't get deep enough downfield fast enough to create separation for his other guy who was the number one read. Or we had the situation where he caught can't remember what game it was, if it was the Eagles game or
The Giants.
The Giants game, where he caught that pass that he wasn't even supposed to be standing there, and he happened to be because he was in the wrong place at the right time. So I know that there's been conversations like that, but man, if I'm the coach and Marvin Mims is on my team, I'm sitting there saying, like, let's run the get open on Hut play. Let's let this guy just go, just fly down the field. We're going to chuck it down there and see what happens. That's what I want. I want to see that at least once a game. I mean, do you agree with me, or do you think that, man, what are your thoughts on this whole conversation about routes, separation, etc.?
Yeah, look, I see a lot of narratives out there too, and I disagree with them. I get to see Marvin Mims in practice, and you have to understand, like, Sean Payton has certain roles for these guys, and it's not going to be, they're not going to use Marvin like Tyreek Hill in a sense where they can use him on crossing patterns and things like that. I think Marvin would be great, but I think they value him so much as a returner. They don't want to also put him at an inherent risk at the middle of the field, but he can do other things. Like the Broncos offense, I think if people go back and start watching all 22, you're going to see at times there are decoy routes to free up other guys, right? And I think the one critique was he stopped running against the Tennessee Titans and it led to an interception. I think that was a valid critique that obviously we could point out from that one game there. But that's been an area that's improved for him. And against the Giants, on that one play that you were talking about, he's running the vertical route so he can clear up Cortland Sutton on the dagger. And the defense, the DBs are playing so far back that it's like the ball's thrown. He's vertical, Sutton's coming underneath, and he just happens to be in the spot. So for me, like the idea that Marvin can't run routes, I watch him run every route that the Broncos ask him to do in practice. He's got a refined route running skill set, like to the point we're sitting there watching practice. We're like, oh gosh, why don't they do this with Marvin? When he's in the slot, why don't they run him on these routes on, across the middle of the field? Like it's all within the structure of the offense and how they want to free guys up. I mean, I think we take a look at the Las Vegas Raiders game this past week, Sayre. A lot of people were complaining about Bo Nix just throwing, underneath and taking what the defense was given to him. Sean Payton even said we had a lot of shot plays called, but we have to check out of them. We can't go to them because they're playing a zone defense. And that's the number one thing. I've talked to wide receivers here on this Broncos team, and they say we are getting so much zone coverage this season, we can't run our man-beating concepts that we certainly have. So Denver's trying to get in situations where obviously if the defense comes out in man, they have checks that they can go to. But Marvin is such a big key down the stretch, not only from the special team side. I mean, he was so big for them last year on special teams, but down the stretch as a receiver, I mean, he's more than just a one-trick pony. I think a lot of people want to say, he could just run the go route. Marvin could do so much more than that, but the team doesn't use him in that role. So I caution people to not label him as that when the reality is, however he's being used, it's not necessarily in his control. But Sean Payton did acknowledge to us when we talked to him on the conference call that they need to find a way to get Marvin more touches. Here's what he said about Marvin since they drafted him and how he felt coming out of the staff meeting on Monday morning.
We felt one of the better returners, if not the best returner in the draft. And so when you check those vision boxes the way we were able to with him, and then I would say he's exceeded our expectation as to what type of guy he is, how he works, what kind of teammate he is. And honestly, just coming out of a staff meeting, we got to continue to find more touches for him on the offensive side of the ball, and we'll do that.
I love that he kind of just guarantees that. I mean, we'll do that. You don't hear Sean Payton kind of guarantee that stuff very often, Cody, when it comes to the strategy of a game. And I think that's really a big part of this whole discussion is Sean Payton's overall strategy and how he plays the game of chess, right? There's some coaches out there that look at players and they say, we're going to scheme the offense to the player, whereas Sean Payton is very much so, the opposite end of that spectrum, that he schemes the players to his offense. And that's just the way that it is. Like he likes to run those different, that's why we're seeing Mercedes Lewis out-snap by, I know it was just one snap, but he outsnaps Evan Ingram, right? And that's the reason for that, is because the way that Sean wanted to play chess against the Raiders was, he's like, I want to run the ball down their throat. I want to have long extended drives. We're not going to necessarily air it out in this game. So that's why we're seeing Marvin's touches and the overall usage be so far off of what it probably could be is because of the way Sean likes to play chess. And now we're coming up on a very interesting discussion where Marvin, he's going to be in a contract year next year, and he is a multiple-time All-Pro, probably going to be his third straight year of making All-Pro, Pro Bowl this year. So how does that discussion go between Marvin and the Broncos when it does come to pass, right? Because Marvin's going to want to catch more passes, and I think he's happy with what he's doing now, but that role has to evolve in order for him to essentially be recruited back to this team long-term.
Well, I would say this too. Marvin is such a great teammate inside the locker room. I've gotten close to Marvin over the last couple of years. The dude just loves being on the field, whether it's offense. He loves what he's doing on special teams. He loves the return aspect there. I think certainly, yes, he'd probably like to be on the field more offensively and catch more passes, but he's very much of the mindset, hey, whatever the team needs me to do, I'm happy to do it. Like Marvin is I'd say probably one of the better guys in that locker room. There's a lot of great guys in that locker room, and I wish Broncos fans had a chance to get to know them a little bit more. But that's why we have the Everyday or All Access Club, because when I go in the locker rooms, we'll get interviews with players. You'll get it there. So make sure you sign up for the Everyday or All Access program here, Locked On Broncos. Plus, you get an ad-free audio experience here of the podcast here. Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your thoughts here on today's show with Marvin Mims, what you would like to see from him and how the offense could utilize him a little bit more going forward. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the AFC West and the Broncos. They could clinch the division within the next 2 weeks. We're going to take a look at the Broncos schedule and the Chargers schedule over the next 4 games and see how the cards may fall ultimately here for this Broncos team. You'll get that here on today's episode of the show.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Mint Mobile. You know, there's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. And right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means that you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And that's what makes this even better, is just how simple Mint makes the switch, right? No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. So turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required $15 a month, equivalent in taxes and fees. Initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
The AFC West crown could be decided in the next 2 weeks, and one thing we do know, the Kansas City Chiefs, their reign is over. It'll either be the Denver Broncos or Los Angeles Chargers who take over the AFC West crown in 2025. We'll break it all down here on today's episode of the show. I want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there. Thank you so much. Sayre, look, I think we're all disappointed watching Monday Night Football, seeing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have kind of been on a little bit of a free fall as of late. They've gotten their own struggles here, facing off against Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers, who the Broncos desperately needed to lose, considering, hey, the AFC West race is a little close right now. 4 games left for both teams, and unfortunately, the Eagles, they couldn't get it done. Disappointed. I was thinking about watching Billy Madison, where he says, "You blew it." That's how I felt last night while watching Monday Night Football, man. Eagles, an absolute clunker. But as Sean Payton said in his conference call, the Chargers are very much alive inside the AFC West race. And now both of these teams have a crucial slate of 4 games remaining.
Speaking of Adam Sandler movies too, Cody, I feel like Justin Herbert was doing like a Chubbs Peterson impression with his, hand device out there that he had going on that was covered up by a glove. He was looking a little bit like Chubbs from Happy Gilmore, but I digress. I mean, Jalen Hurts, 5 turnovers in that. I mean, just it was brutal to watch. I don't always stay up for the Monday night games, but when I do, it's to hate watch the AFC West rival, right? And I wanted to watch the Chargers blow it in overtime. They were really close. I mean, the offsides on 4th down, Jalen Hurts was playing really well on that drive up to that point where, he throws the pick. It's just an ill-advised pass. And I think really, Cody, what it comes down to is The Chargers have an awesome defense, but man, you beat the Eagles. You forced 5 turnovers in that game, and you win by 3 points in overtime. It takes you almost that entire drive to get it done. So I don't know. I'm not buying what the Chargers are selling, but there's no doubt that they've kept the pressure on the Broncos, right? I mean, this would have been a situation where had the Eagles beat the Chargers on Monday night, man, the Broncos come into this game against Green Bay saying, if we beat Green Bay, we got this thing locked up. I mean, that's the reality. They can still lock up a playoff spot with a win against Green Bay. That will solidify it. You're in the playoffs, you win this game, but man, they could have solidified the division if the Chargers would have blown it there. So it is frustrating, but at the same time, nothing is given in the NFL. We expect this. Even when the Broncos have a big lead in a game, or, now that they've got a relatively sizable lead late in the season in the division, you don't expect anything to be given to you. It's always going to be tooth and nail to the end.
Well, I think for both the Broncos and the Chargers, their next 4 games, they're essentially playoff games. They're against teams that have winning records, and I think that's going to be exciting here. Let's take a look at the Broncos' next 4 games. Obviously, this Sunday against the Green Bay Packers, top team inside the NFC right now. Very good team. It's going to be a nice test here. We'll obviously preview that game on tomorrow's episode of the show. Plus, you'll get a crossover Thursday with Peter Bukowski this week as well. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who are playing really good football right now. Former friend Tim Patrick, he's balling right now. And then the Broncos have a Christmas Day game on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. And then they close out with a home game against the Chargers. Now, the next 2 weeks are going to be very important, Sarah, because, look, a win on Sunday for the Broncos would be huge. The Chargers' next 4 games, they're at the Kansas City Chiefs, at the Dallas Cowboys, home versus the Houston Texans, and then on the road at the Broncos. So 3 road games here for the Chargers, 1 home game for them, 3 home games for Denver, 1 road game for them. The AFC West could very well be decided in the next 2 weeks. I look at the Chargers' schedule now, and I start to think to myself, Sarah, like, it is a hard road for them considering who they're facing, the offensive line that obviously Justin Herbert has to deal with. The dude, he made a lot of plays escaping pressure, but man, he was pressured and hit left and right. He turned the football over. The Broncos have a really good opportunity right here to take advantage of, hey, we win, they lose, we have a chance to lock up the division here in the next 2 weeks. I think the Broncos will ultimately get it done, Sarah, but these next 4 weeks for both teams are going to be huge. And I think the number one thing you don't want is to go into that Week 18 game saying, hey, this is it. This is for the AFC West crown. The stakes are high. You kind of like the storylines if you're like into the media and you like television and stuff like that. For us, it's like, nah, don't be in that situation. Go lock it up. And maybe Jarrett Stidham is starting that Chargers game so Bo Nix can rest and the Broncos can take care of business because maybe they got the 1 seed locked up.
I was going to say, that's what I want to see against the Chargers is a Jarrett Stidham game. And that's what I'm really hoping for at this point. Maybe we get a couple of Jarrett Stidham opportunities here in the next 4 games. And the Chargers road is harder. Just straight up, Cody. I mean, you got to go on the road this week to play against Kansas City, who's obviously going to be ticked off trying to get back to 500. Then you go to Dallas where, I don't know if they still are, but they were at one point averaging over 40 points per game at home this season. So Dallas is way tougher on the road, or for the Chargers on the road, than they would be if they were coming to Los Angeles. And then I think obviously you have that game against Houston that it don't matter where you play Houston with that defense. They are suffocating right now. They're playing outstanding football. So to me, the Broncos have the better path, and it's the home games that they play, right? 1 game left on the road, and that's at Kansas City on Christmas. We'll see what kind of stakes there are for that game. I'm guessing the Chiefs will probably have more to play for by that point, but we can't sit here and overlook the Packers.
No.
Or the Jaguars for that matter. I think that this is one of those games against Green Bay where it feels like the Broncos have that margin for error, right? Because it's an NFC opponent. Obviously, you've already locked up that common opponents with the Patriots, but the Packers game, it looms large now because the Chargers beat the Eagles. So now just keep taking care of business, keep controlling what you can control, keep winning games, keep that in front of you. This is a good game, a good opportunity for the Broncos to go out and not just beat a team that, hey, this can help us in our road to the number 1 seed, but maybe it could prove to the rest of the NFL, like in a Super Bowl preview, that you're true, real contenders for that.
I couldn't have said it better myself, friend. And look, I think that's where the Broncos are at. And I like the mentality of this team. And I always tell Broncos fans, because look, I think sometimes everyone gets ahead of themselves. They look at the schedule, they start saying, like this game's going to be a win. This game's going to be a win. It's like, no, just let the games play out. Players in the locker room are very much like, we're just focused on this week. We're not focused on next week. We're not focused on what happened the week before. And Sean Payton kind of echoed that sentiment this week by saying, really, our focus is inward more so than it is on whatever's happening on the outside. We can only control, we can control, and we need to do whatever we can to get ourselves the best seating possible here for a potential playoff stretch, which, man, it's exciting times right now in the National Football League. And I think in particular, watching Monday night, it was so cool just laying in bed, sitting there with my wife, and they bring up the standings graphic, and you see the Denver Broncos at the number 1 seed, and you see the logo. It's like, man, it feels good. Like, we haven't been able to cover a winning team except last year, and now obviously this year. It's been a lot of years of watching a lot of losing Broncos football where the standard has just been subpar. It's been poor. That has changed now. The standard is higher. The expectations are higher. And we're excited because that means we raise our expectations as well for ourselves here. Broncos Country, thank you so much for rocking with us, tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen every single day. Don't forget to sign up for the Everydayer Club. You can be the Everydayer member portion, or you can go with the All Access, where you're going to get exclusive content that nobody else gets, including all 22 film reviews, exclusive daily newsletter. So if you miss a show, well, guess what? You get a newsletter of the show delivered directly to your email inbox. Plus, you get one-on-one texting with us and an exclusive 15% discount on Locked On merchandise, plus access to the Locked On Broncos and the Locked On Everydayer Club Discord channel, where you can interact with other members of Broncos Country and your other favorite teams inside of Discord as well, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow's episode of the show, we're going to break down a little bit of an early preview for the Green Bay Packers and why the Broncos must have a great plan in place to counter Micah Parsons and the pass rush that Green Bay Packers can certainly bring to the table. You're going to get all that on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos.